remember waking to that voice crackling through the tannoy. "Good morning, campers!" The smell of bacon drifting from the dining hall. The weight of that chalet key in your pocket. The flash of a Redcoat blazer as your parents finally relaxed for the first time all year. For millions of British families, Butlins was not just a holiday. It was the highlight of the entire year. The week you counted down to from January. The place where children ran free and strangers became friends over bingo cards and ballroom dances. But somewhere between the cheap flights to Benidorm and the rise of the theme park, something precious died. The camps closed. The chalets were demolished. The magic faded away. This is how Butlins lost its magic. Welcome back to the channel. If you have fond memories of British holiday camps, or you simply love stories from the Britain we remember, hit that subscribe button and drop your Butlins memories in the comments below. Now let us go back to where it all began. In 1921, a young man named Billy Butlin arrived in England with just £5 in his pocket. He had served as a bugler in the Canadian Army during the Great War. He had worked in a Toronto department store. But his destiny lay in the fairgrounds of Britain, where his grandmother had run a travelling show. Billy invested 4 of those £5 in a hoopla stall and joined his uncle Marshall Hill on the fairground circuit. He quickly discovered something that would define his entire career. Give the customers a better chance to win, and they keep coming back for more. One stall became several. Several became a travelling fair. By 1927, Billy had leased land from the Earl of Scarborough in the seaside town of Skegness and built a permanent amusement park. Dodgem cars appeared there for the first time in Britain. Billy held the exclusive license to import them. A zoo followed with lions and zebras. Then came the idea that would change British holidays forever. Billy remembered a miserable holiday at a boarding house in Barry Island, Wales. The landlady had thrown guests out after breakfast and refused to let them return until lunch. After lunch, out again until dinner. When it rained, families trudged the streets with nowhere to go. Children were bored, parents were frustrated, and Billy thought there must be something better for working people who saved all year for one precious week away. He imagined a place where everything was included. 3 meals a day, entertainment morning to night, accommodation that welcomed you rather than pushed you away. A week of genuine holiday for the price of a week of wages. On the 11th of April 1936, Easter Eve, Billy Butlin opened his first holiday camp at Ingold near Skegness. The famous aviator Amy Johnson cut the ribbon. She was the first woman to fly solo from England to Australia, and now she was opening something equally revolutionary for ordinary British families. An advertisement in the Daily Express offered holidays with 3 meals a day and free entertainment. A week cost between 35 shillings and £3 depending on the season. The shares sold out in 5 minutes. By the end of that first summer, the camp had to double in size from 500 guests to 2,000. Billy had tapped into something profound. Working families did not want charity, they wanted dignity. They wanted to feel special for 1 week of the year, and Butlins delivered. But there was a problem in those early days. Guests arrived at Skegness and kept to themselves. Families sat in silence. Some looked actively bored. Billy watched and worried. He had built the facilities, but something was missing. The atmosphere, the joy, the togetherness. He turned to Norman Bradford, an engineer who had helped construct the camp, and asked him to do something about it. Norman walked into the breakfast hall one morning and shouted a hearty good morning to the crowd. When they shouted good morning back, something clicked into place. Norman told jokes. He organized games. He got strangers talking to each other. By the end of that evening, the camp was buzzing. Billy knew immediately what he needed. An army of Normans, people whose job was simply to make guests happy. He dressed them in red blazers with white piping. Bright, cheerful, impossible to miss. The Redcoats were born, and they would become as much a part of British culture as fish and chips or the FA Cup final. Walk into any Butlins camp in 1975 and you would find yourself in a self-contained world. 10,000 people could be staying at the larger sites: Skegness, Minehead, Filey, Bognor, Regis. Each one a miniature town with its own shops, post office, theatre, swimming pool, fairground, ballroom, and chapel. You needed nothing from the outside world, and the outside world could not touch you. The day began with Radio Butlin crackling through the tannoy speakers mounted on poles throughout the camp. Wakey, wakey, rise and shine. Music would play as families dressed in their chalets. Those chalets were basic by today's standards. Mock Tudor beams on some, shared toilet and bathroom blocks at the end of each row, cold water in the sink and hot water from a communal tap. But there was a chalet made to make your bed, your own front door, a sense of home away from home. The dining halls were cavernous spaces where 1,000 people ate at once, 2 sittings for each meal. You were allocated a table and a time, first sitting or second. The menu was not extensive, but it was plentiful. Bacon and eggs for breakfast, a proper roast for dinner. Food arrived on electrically heated trolleys. The noise was extraordinary. Hundreds of conversations at once, the clatter of plates and cutlery, and when a waitress dropped a tray, the entire hall would erupt in cheers. That moment, that collective joy at someone else's small disaster. It captures something about what Butlins meant. We were all in it together. For children, Butlins was freedom in a way that seems impossible today. The Beaver Club for ages 6 to 11, the 9 to 13 club for older children. Redcoat aunties and uncles would take you off to be pirates for the day, or run races on the sports field, or compete in the highway code competition. Parents would only see their children at mealtimes. And that was perfectly fine because the camp was safe. You could not escape. There were fences, there were gates. But inside those boundaries, a child could roam anywhere. The funfair was free. Completely free. You could ride the carousel 10 times in a row if you wanted. The ghost train, the helter-skelter, the dodgems your dad pretended to be too grown up to enjoy. The monorail at Skegness and Minehead glided 20 feet above the ground with barely a safety rail. This was the 1970s, and we trusted each other more. In the evenings, the ballroom came alive. The Viennese ballroom for old-time dancing. A separate venue for rock and roll when that arrived in the 50s. Redcoats would lead the dances, teaching fathers who had 2 left feet and waltzing with grandmothers who remembered when they were young. The competitions defined a Butlins holiday in ways nothing else could. Knobbly knees for the men. Parade across the stage with your trouser legs rolled up while the crowd judges whose legs are the lumpiest. Glamorous granny for the older ladies. Tarzan look-alike. Spaghetti-eating races. Fancy dress on the final night. The whole week built toward the final evening when the band would strike up Goodnight Campers. Everyone would line up in rows across the ballroom floor. Arms linked with strangers who had become friends over 7 short days. Legs kicking gently in time to the music, singing together. For that moment, we were not from Sheffield, or Cardiff, or Glasgow. We were Butlins campers. We belonged. By the mid-1960s, Butlins had reached its absolute peak. 10 camps across Britain and Ireland. Over 1 million visitors every single year. The famous Redcoats became a training ground for entertainment legends. Des O'Connor started as a Redcoat at Filey, Jimmy Tarbuck at Plelhelly, Michael Barrymore at Skegness, Roy Hudd, Ted Rogers. The list goes on. If you wanted to make it in show business, Butlins was where you learned your craft. Billy Butlin retired in 1968 and moved to Jersey for tax reasons. His son Bobby took over. In 1972, the business was sold to the Rank Organization for £43 million. The empire seemed secure. The formula seemed permanent. British manufacturing, steady bookings, loyal customers. What could possibly go wrong? Then came the Costa del Sol. Package holidays had existed since the 1950s, but they were expensive. Exotic treats for the adventurous few. By the 1970s, the price had dropped far enough that ordinary families could afford 2 weeks in Spain for barely more than a week at Butlins. And Spain had something Britain could never guarantee: sunshine. Suddenly, the families who had packed their Ford Cortinas for Skegness were packing suitcases for Gatwick Airport. The children who had run free at Butlins were now swimming in Mediterranean hotel pools. By 1980, 3 times as many people were holidaying abroad as had done just 10 years earlier. The British seaside resort was fighting for survival, and Butlins was bleeding customers. The camps that had once seemed modern now looked tired. The chalets that had felt cozy now felt cramped. Shared bathrooms that nobody minded in 1955 felt unacceptable in 1979. The regimentation that had once created community now reminded visitors of the military. The tannoy wake-up call that had felt cheerful now felt intrusive. Young people wanted discos and clubs, not ballroom dancing competitions. Butlins tried everything to adapt. They scrapped the compulsory dining hall sittings. They introduced self-catering chalets. They toned down the regimentation. They even bought a 400-room hotel in Torremolinos, Spain, trying to join the enemy rather than fight them. But low bookings meant low investment. Reports came in of leaking chalets, cold swimming pools, peeling paint, closed facilities, poor food, and indifferent staff. £3 million was invested in 1978, but it was nowhere near enough. The closures began. Mosney in Ireland shut in 1982. Clacton and Filey both closed in 1983. Barry Island, the last camp Billy Butlin himself had built, was sold in 1986 and limped on under new ownership until 1996. PWL Heli and Air were transferred to the sister company Haven in 1998, renamed Hafan Y. Moore and Craig Tara. The Butlins name was stripped from them. From 10 camps at its peak, just 3 remained: Skegness, Minehead, Bognor Regis. The remaining sites were rebranded with desperate new names that meant nothing to anyone. Funcoast World, Summer West World. The traditional competitions were scrapped. The Redcoat uniforms were redesigned by fashion consultants. West End choreographers were brought in to create slick productions. The whole high-de-high atmosphere that had defined Butlins for 50 years was deliberately dismantled. In the year 2000, the business was sold again to Bourne Leisure. They invested heavily. Modern water parks replaced outdoor swimming pools. New hotels with ensuite bathrooms replaced the chalet blocks. Skyline pavilions created indoor entertainment spaces immune to the British weather. Today, a standard room at Butlins has a television, private bathroom, and heating. The deluxe options have balconies, wine on arrival, and a second television in the bedroom. It is successful. The 3 remaining resorts are profitable. Families still visit in their hundreds of thousands. The Redcoats still wear their famous blazers, though the design has changed many times. There are music weekends for adults only, featuring soul music and rock and blues. Big-name acts perform. The brand survives. But is it Butlins? Visit Minehead today, and you will find most of the original buildings still standing. The old Chalet Rose, the same layout Billy designed in 1962. Walk around in the early morning before the crowds wake, and you can almost feel what it used to be. Almost. But there is no tannoy wake-up call anymore. No dining hall where 1,000 strangers eat together. No knobbly knees competition. No glamorous granny parade. No arm-linked sing-along at the end of the evening. The magic that made Butlins special was never about the buildings or the rides or even the Redcoats. It was about a Britain where working families could share something precious together. A week where children ran free and parents relaxed. Where strangers became friends over bad jokes and worse dancing. Where nobody cared what you did for a living or where you came from because we were all just campers together. That Britain has faded like the photographs in old holiday albums. Somewhere in a drawer, in a house in Sheffield or Cardiff or Glasgow, there is probably an old Butlins badge, a small piece of enamel issued at reception in 1973. Proof that once upon a time you belonged to something special. Butlins did not just lose customers to cheap flights and changing tastes. It lost the Britain that needed it. The country where a week of holiday by the sea was the greatest luxury a working family could imagine. We did not just lose holiday camps. We lost a way of being together that we will never quite recreate. Do you remember the fairground rides that were free? The dining hall cheers? The Redcoat who made your mum laugh? Drop your Butlins memories in the comments below. And if this took you back to happier times, hit that subscribe button for more stories from the Britain we remember.